Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a very special episode of the Ringside Chronicles here. I'm here with my guest, the Arab Legend Al Farat. I want to thank you very much for inviting us over here.
Thanks for having me, man.
Where to even begin? I mean, you have had such a legendary career. You have been all over. I don't even know how did you get interested in professional wrestling? Let's just start there with the basics.
Well, you know, I know a lot of people are. You see, this is the type of interview that the fans like to watch. Absolutely. Because it's interactive. You know, it's more reality based, and I've done several of these quote unquote shoot interviews, and it gives the kind of like when a good book gives a reader, it transports a reader to a different dimension. You know, it kind of transports them to a different world as they read every page, every paragraph. Same way with these interviews, it gives you a behind the scenes look at the life of the character, not the character.
Right.
And you know, I really did start watching professional wrestling at the age of 7. I was 7 years old. Yeah. 7 years old, and my dad would take me to all the different arenas, and I remember my dad was a merchant marine, so he would move around a lot. We'd go to, you know, we'd live in New York for a year or two, then we'd go to Detroit, so I've been to all the major ones, Cobo Hall, Madison Square Garden, the Philadelphia Spectrum. Never got to go to this Dallas Sportatorium, but I went there later on, and so I was really a hardcore fan of professional wrestling. Old school professional wrestling. I mean, it got to the point where I was collecting those, you know, those wrestlers, the Wrestler, Wrestling Insider.
Oh, yes.
I used to have hundreds and hundreds of those, man. I mean, I was fanatical. And still to this day, and this isn't me bragging, but still to this day, I can go toe-to-toe with about any historian, about any professional wrestler in any territory in the world, and I know something about them. I mean, I pride myself on knowing from A to Z everything about professional wrestling. That's how passionate I was about it. So, I wanted to become a professional wrestler, and of course my mom said no.
I think a lot of parents said no.
And what a lot of people don't know about me is that my mom is actually Mexican, and then my dad is Puerto Rican and Lebanese. So we grew up kind of in a traditional household, and a lot of that wrestling stuff was kind of taboo. Because, you know, you grew up hearing that, oh, it's fake, you know, you don't want to do that, you're just going to, you know, make a fool out of yourself. Come to find out, my mother's cousin, Robert Cortez, a.k.a. Bobby Bold Eagle, he was a big-time wrestler. He had a school in Gleason's Arena in New York City, and I was living in New York at the time. So unbeknownst to my mom, I went over there and started training with him. He's actually my mother's cousin. We say, you read a lot of places where they say he's my cousin, but he was actually my mother's cousin. So I started training with him, and I trained a little bit with him, and then of course we had it out because my mom got involved. So I started training with Johnny Rods, the unpredictable Johnny Rods. And I walk into the school, and I start training and already in the school when I got there was a guy named Mondo Clean. Well, that was his wrestling name. His real name is Phil Thies. And he later on went to become Damien Demento.
Oh, yes.
And so he was there, so he helped train me. And a guy named Bill DeMott, he trains for WWE. He was, back then he was Crash the Eliminator. I remember Crash the Eliminator. Then he went on to be Hugh Morris and all that. Well, he was already there. So these guys kind of helped train me. I'd go in there and get trained by Johnny Rods and kind of work the ropes, work the ring with these guys. But then these other guys came after me, or around the same time, and I'm talking about Taz, Tommy Dreamer, Little Nunzio. Remember Nunzio from ECW?
ECW guys.
Nunzio. These are all guys that not only trained me, they graduated. We came from the same graduating class. I mean, I've got pictures of us all, you know, little skinny guys training with Johnny Rods. Bubba Ray Dudley was in that class. Big Sally Graciano was in that class. And then there were other guys, of course, didn't make it. My tag team partner, they paired me up with this guy named Adolfo Bermudez, and we became the Sioux War Party at IWCCW when Taz and Tom Dreamer, we were all in the same company. Of course, my partner later on went to become Dances with Dudley. He was the Indian Dudley Boys. I don't know if you remember this one day. Because they had a black Dudley Boy, a sign guy Dudley, all of them.
The whole
one of them was
Dudley family.
Yeah, well, one of them was called Dances with Dudley. That was after we got trained, so anyway, so I came from that generation. Gleason's Gym, the famed Gleason's Gym on Front Street in Brooklyn, and that's how I kind of cut my teeth. And then from there, I started working with different promoters. Killer Kowalski was running up in Massachusetts. Dino Santa was running in Pennsylvania. Kodiak Bear was running in New Jersey. A lot of different promoters. Dino Brito was running up in Canada, Montreal. Went up there several times and started working these different territories, and that's how I got kind of introduced into professional wrestling. And you hear all the time these stories about, you sleep in the car, and man, that's true. Back in them days, man, we slept in our car. I remember sleeping on park benches in parks, because I didn't want to go. I would travel. I'd take a Greyhound or a train to a city that was 6 hours away, and I didn't have the money to go back home and go back the next day, and sometimes there were double shots, so we had to stay. So all these stories you hear about sleeping in your car, sleeping in park benches, and eating real cheap, or sometimes not eating at all, that's true, man, because I went through it. I'm living proof.
You mentioned the hardships, and that's something that that a lot of fans or the detractors of wrestling don't really think about. They call it fake. They don't know how real and how grueling just the travel schedule alone can be. What kept you motivated during sleeping on park benches? I mean, if I had to sleep on a park bench for my job, I'd look for another job. What kept you motivated?
Well, I did an interview just yesterday. I did an interview with a friend of mine named Paul Ween. He does a one of these internet radio deals. I can't think of the name of it right now, but anyway, I did an interview with him, and it was me and Kevin Von Erich. We're on the air talking about some show that we have coming up. And Paul asked Kevin a question. He said that he met Jesse the Body Ventura one time. This is the host, Paul. He was telling Kevin, I met Jesse the Body Ventura one time, and I was sharing with him that we had three things in common. He said we're both in politics, because Jesse was the governor. Mm-hmm. We both like cigars, because they both smoke cigars, and we're both in professional wrestling. And as he was telling Kevin this, he told Kevin, but what struck me oddest about the whole thing is that when I mentioned professional wrestling, that's the only thing that Jesse said, wait a minute, you're what? He acknowledged that they were both in professional wrestling, and he said, you're screwed. Basically is what he told his kid. So this kid tells Kevin, and wouldn't you say that's about right? Once you're in this business, you're screwed. And Kevin didn't get it. Kevin kind of said, no, you can get out of it if you want to, but the reality is, it's because it's a drug, man. It's in your blood. You could retire. So many guys like to boast about, I got out of it. They say that, but 20 years down the line, 30 years down the line, when they're recognized for something they did 20 or 30 years ago, they like that feeling. So really, it never leaves you.
Right.
It never leaves you. If anybody had a reason to leave the business, it would be Kevin Von Erich for all the trials and tribulations he's been through. And he still manages to stay in it. So to answer your question, yeah, I went hungry a lot of times. Yeah, I was broke most of the times. I missed a lot of ball games. I missed a lot of basketball games. I had 2 kids. I went through so many different relationships, and divorce, and it was horrible. But I did it because it's a drug. But not that that's a bad thing. I mean, drugs are bad, but I'm talking about it. It's just wrestling. Professional wrestling is a drug, man. It's in your blood. You can't get it up. When you love professional wrestling, man, as you know, it's hard to live one day without talking about it. And what kept me motivated is I always thought in the back of my head that one day I was going to be in a place where I can talk to my children and my grandchildren about the stuff that I've done. Never in my wildest dreams did I ever think I'd be across the ring from guys, with huge names. I watched them on TV, and here I was, wrestling these guys. And then to get inducted by my peers in 2 different halls of fame, that's why I did it. Basically, I did it because one day I wanted to realize my dream, and I did. Yeah, I never made it to WWE. I had the opportunity to. That's a story I've never told anybody. When I sent a video, back in the day you had to send a video with 3 matches, you had to send an 8x10, several pictures, you had to send references. I sent that to, at that time it wasn't John Laurinaitis. John Laurinaitis is the head of talent relations. It was a guy named James J. Dillon.
J.J. Dillon.
He was working in the office for Titan Sports. And I sent him, I had the address, and I sent him a box with the video, pictures, and recommendation letters. Johnny Rods wrote me a recommendation letter. And I waited, and I waited, and I waited. Man, back then I was doing an Indian gimmick. I had the war bonnet and everything, the headdress, you know, and would dance around. And I was, you know, making a name for myself in all the indie circuits. I get a letter that I still have, matter of fact, framed. I have that letter framed, which is odd because who would want to keep a rejection letter framed? But the fact that it had the logo, WWF at that time logo, and there was a letter from James J. Dillon, signed by him as head of talent, saying, unfortunately, due to, you know, unfortunately, we're not able to consider you at this time, something along that effect. 2 weeks later, Tatanka debuted. In other words, I was too late.
Yes,
I was too late.
Was already given.
He was already, you know, they were working him. You know, I think I honestly, if I'd have wrote that letter and sent that in a few months earlier, I'd have gotten that spot, because at that time, Tatanka, they were just looking for an Indian wrestler, and Tatanka, if you remember, they really didn't look the part. You know what I mean? I had,
but it was pushed very hard.
But it was pushed very hard, yeah. But you know, those are just close calls. You know what I mean? But at the same time, and let me tell you, I got discouraged after that. I got real discouraged, and I got out of professional wrestling. And for 7 or 8 years, I focused on music, because I'm a musician by trade. I focused on music, and you know how ironic. I got out of wrestling because my dream didn't quote unquote come true. So I pursued music, had recorded 9 albums, 3 of them nominated for the Grammy Awards. So see, I excelled in other things, you know, but again, going back to it being a drug, I couldn't stay out of it, man. I just couldn't do it. And one day I got my second divorce, and I moved to Texas, of all places. I wanted to get away from my wife my ex-wife. So I just kind of closed my eyes, and we did one of these deals, and I moved to Dallas with a friend of mine, Lance. And I heard that Akbar, who I had known from previous years, had a school there in Dallas. And I remember that day that I walked in there to see him, I had this deal going on.
Around what time or what year is this?
97, 98. Okay. I went in there. I started in 87, but I got out of it around 90, 91. I was disgusted, you know, and kind of just didn't want to have anything to do with it. The first 6, 7 years I didn't do anything. 97, 98, in that area, I moved to Dallas, and I found out he had a school. So I went to his school just to say hello, you know. And I had this going on, the goatee. I remember, because I was always clean shaven because I did the Indian gimmick, you know. So I walk in there, hey, Yak, what's going on? And we embrace and we talk and start talking about the old days. And I told him that I was kind of out of it, but wanting to kind of sort of get in. And he looked at me, he goes, babe, because that's how he talked. Babe, you ever considered doing an Arab gimmick? I said, well, actually, you know, on my daddy's side, I happen to have some Lebanese in me way back there, but I don't, you know, we don't really talk about it. You ought to consider it. If you do, let me know, because we're looking for somebody to do that. Because at that time, the Sheik wasn't doing it. Abdullah was already starting to get old, and those are the only 2 big ones that never did anything with the whole the Iron Sheik. But he was, you know, on his way out. So I thought about it for a few days, came back to the school, and told him I wanted to do it. He got me my first turban and told me where to get my pointy toe boots, and I got them. And a good thing I got them from the guy that actually makes them for Abdullah. Made them for the Sheik, made them for the Iron Sheik. His name was Clifford Macias from Houston. I got 4 or 5 pairs from him, one shot, and I started doing the gimmick. I was a bit hesitant, but I did it. And man, the first night that I went out there, because see what happened was, when I did the gimmick, he's the one that he said, you still use your name Al, but you're going to be Al Farat. He gave me the original Sheik's last name. Later on, I dropped the H, but in honor of Akbar and the Sheik, I kind of mixed both their styles together. So the first night that I debuted with that, man, and I felt the reaction of the crowd, and they were, I mean, hot. And promoters started calling me, and I knew I was onto something. I said, this is what I was meant to do, you know, because I did it so well with the accent, rolling my R's, you know, because I'm Hispanic. So I knew right there and then that this is what I was supposed to do. So I started traveling with Akbar's group. He ran a promotion with a guy named Tom Vance. He had a promotion called Superstars of Wrestling. So we started having shows, and I started doing the whole Al Farat thing. And I remember the first night that the first tour that we did. After that first night, he actually sent me on a tour. It was like 3 or 4 towns in a row, all in East Texas. I'll never forget, man. I got there, and this is just a separate story, but you're gonna like this. I never told the story to anybody. So he puts me. He goes, Al, I didn't get a hotel room, so you're gonna be staying with Boo Ray. And I thought to myself, Boo Ray, who the hell's Boo Ray? You know, some big redneck guy that was a friend of his, and everybody knew Boo Ray but me. I didn't know who the hell Boo Ray was. So this blows people's mind when I tell this. So the whole 4 days that I'm working for Superstars of Wrestling, I'm staying with this guy Boo Ray in his trailer, and Boo Ray's a bad drunk, and Boo Ray says, "Well, brother," in his real thick hick accent, "you can stay on the couch, or you can stay right there on the floor. I've got some blankets and stuff like that." And I'll never forget. And I stayed on the floor, and I'll wait till I get to the end of the story, man. It's amazing. So for 4 days, I stayed on Boo Ray's floor in his living room. And I remember I would stay up like this, and after every show, we'd go back, because we wrestled 4 towns within a 100-mile radius. And I would stay on the floor in the living room. I never thought anything of it, Sometimes I'd get on the couch, sometimes I'd lay on the floor, and he had a real danky, real smelly trailer. On that last day, we're driving home, and Akbar's driving. What do you think? What did you think about Boo Ray? You weren't spooked by him, were you? And I said, "Why would I be spooked by Boo Ray?" He goes, "Oh, he didn't tell you?" "No." He said, "He's the guy that killed Chris Adams." Remember Chris Adams? Gentleman Chris Adams got killed. Not only that, where'd you sleep? He asked me. I slept on the couch and slept on the floor. I slept on the damn spot where he stabbed Chris Adams. I was laying on Chris Adams' damn body, damn near. When he stabbed him, I guess when they got into a fight, and Chris Adams was beating up Boo Ray stabbed him. It happened right on the floor, on the spot where I was laying. And it sends chills up my spine, because that's the story that I tell people, and they freak out. Yeah. True story. But little stories like that is what keeps me going, because I want to tell my story. That's why I'm in the process of writing a book, because I want to tell stories. I mean, I got bunches of stories like that. One time I was in Puerto Rico, and I'll never forget. The promoter tells me, his name was Tom Savoldi. He was doing stuff with Carlos Colon. He says, he had a real thick New York accent. He's from New York. He goes, "Hey, Al, I need you to go to the airport and pick up the Iron Sheik." I remember that. He was one of my idols too. I wasn't doing the argument yet. So I go pick him up at the airport, and the Iron Sheik is high as a kite. I mean, he smelled like weed. He comes off the airplane, out of the airport, in his damn wrestling boots with the horns. I'll never forget it. He had regular clothes on, shorts. And then I didn't realize who was behind the Iron Sheik. Turns out I was picking up 2 people. And right behind the Iron Sheik, Rocky Johnson. Can you imagine how starstruck I was? Here I am, a young guy, and I'm being asked to pick up, the Iron Sheik, and Rocky Johnson is behind him. The Rock's dad. Yeah. They get in my car. He starts smoking weed in my car. The Sheik does. Rocky Johnson lights up his cigar. I mean, I was sick for days. But that's another one of those funny stories that a lot of people want to hear. You know what I mean? And that's why I shared it with you.
Absolutely. Let's go ahead. We're going to go ahead and take a break before we go on, because we're having a great conversation right now with the Arab Legend Al Farat. Ladies and gentlemen, we will be right back. So how did you get started in professional wrestling?
Back in about 2008, I traveled back up home to Milwaukee, and I met a man by the name of Angel Armani. He has like 5 guys in the PWI 500 right now. I'm not gonna drop any names or nothing, but some of those guys are on TV right now. And he taught me the old school way. I didn't get my first match till about after a year. Just breaking down the ring, setting up chairs, just putting dues in. and then I came down to Laredo back in 2011 and met Ray from LWA. Started hearing LWA down here in Laredo when I came down.
You were with the LWA for a while. What led to the falling out with LWA?
It was politics, really, between Booker, the promoter, and me. And then I was fed some misinformation, or I was poisoned with misinformation from a rival promotion over a fundraiser that was done by for Marco Saranda, the fireman that passed away with cancer. Rest in peace. And I was upset about the rumors that were delivered to me. And instead of confronting the promoter about it, I just decided to leave. And I went to a different promotion, and I was bad-mouthing LWA for a while, and I bumped into Ray recently, and we communicated about everything. He showed me all the receipts and what was spent, and he proved it to me, and everything was done the way it was supposed to be, and I had to apologize to all the LWA fans for the false information that I relayed to them too, and tainting their image, LWA, and it's just it got to me about the way that the information was relayed to me from another promotion. And then me being Dirty Sanchez, I ended up putting some extra salsa on that taco, trying to lower LWA, but at the end of the day, I apologize for the false information that I relayed to the public. The fundraiser was done the way it was supposed to be. I saw all the receipts and everything, and from here on, we move on. Indie wrestling, baby.
Do you think this could be the beginning of another working relationship with the LWA, or what do you foresee?
Definitely. Right now, LWA is in fact, and even when me and Ray and Ace, we were not seeing, we weren't talking. Me and him had spoke like a year and a half. Even when we weren't talking, I said publicly, I don't like LWA, but they are the most organized promotion in the Laredo. And I'll stand by that right now.
I want to thank you for your candid comments and your statements here. Do you have any final thoughts for the fans of Laredo Wrestling Alliance, or your fans, anything?
LWA fans, stay tuned. It's about to get dirty again.
Y vamos a darle la bienvenida a una leyenda del cuadrilátero. Leyenda dentro de lo que es lo exótico. Señoras y señores, chiquita pero picosa, la reina del cuadrilátero, ¡Cassandro!
Morena, ¿cómo estás? Estamos en Bucaramanga.
Alcohol. Eso es lo que es un exótico luchador.
And you have been gay all my life, and people can tell like a mile away that I was a little Tinkerbell. So what happens? They smell it. It's like a dog, man. And then listen, they get you.
Soy Doctor Maldad. Los rudos somos privilegiados por el diablo. Somos lo único que deberíamos estar aquí en la tierra.
I'm only gay up my ass, but you come and get me right now, and you'll see who I am.
we've been here with the Arab Legend Al Farat. We've just been going over his career and some of the stories he's been telling us. And you mentioned the stabbing of gentleman Chris Adams, and one thing that I wanted to ask you about was the stabbing death of Bruiser Brody, which was back in 1988, I believe. You were at that show. You were on that card. Walk us through that. What happened? What did you experience? Walk us through your experience.
Well, first of all, let me go back to the Chris Adams things, because if I said stabbing, I'm not sure. I think he actually was shot.
Oh, okay, all right.
Might have been, but I don't recall. But yeah, at that time I was working as a ring crew for WWC. It was World Wrestling Council. Carlos Colon was the owner. Victor Jovica was the other owner, and then there was several other guys that had interest in the company. Like Abdullah had part interest in it. So did a guy named Jose Gonzalez Huertas, a.k.a. the Invader. Well, I don't like to sound one-sided on that story, because the reality is a lot of people knew Brody, and they knew how he could sometimes was a bully. And
we're not telling this to
no,
bury anybody.
We're not burying.
We just want to get your experience.
Yeah, we're not burying anybody.
But
But from what I understand, there was a lot of heat between those two guys. They were always arguing. They supposedly got into these big fights, and then one day I got out of hand, and apparently he roughed up Jose Gonzalez, the Invader, and kind of ridiculed him in front of the boys. And I remember him being very upset many of the times. And eventually it led to Jose taking off, coming back, and calling him to the back and stabbing Bruiser Brody. None of us saw it but three people. And it was Chris and Mark the Youngblood brothers. Them and Tony Atlas. Matter of fact, after the stabbing, Brody died in Tony's arms.
I heard Brody was such a big, large man that Tony Atlas was the one who had to carry him.
Correct.
For the paramedics.
Yeah, but me, at the time of that, me and a guy named Jules Strongbow were outside talking, and when it all happened and all went down, we were like in shock. The next day, all the American wrestlers fled the island. I mean, the company lost all the American wrestlers. It was a skeleton crew from that point on. And I stayed because I was there. But a few months later, the company got bombarded with bad press. They went downhill, and another company was formed called AWF, and they took all the remaining competition that was on the island. And I was one of them. I mean, they took everybody. Savio Vega. They took even the announcer Hugo Savinovich, who later on went to go do Spanish broadcasting for WWE. But they took all of us, and I don't know how they ever. Well, they've never actually recovered after that, because they're still around. And incredibly, the man who murdered Brody, self-defense supposedly, got off. But ironically, he's still the booker there. Wow. And he had killed somebody else before Brody. A lot of people don't know that. He actually killed Michelle Martel in the 80s. Of course, that was deemed an accident, but it happened in the ring. But that's pretty much my story about Bruiser Brody. I can tell you that I've worked Bruiser Brody, and yeah, he was a tough man to get along with. He had his friends, not very many, but he did. But for whatever reason, Jose got acquitted. It was proven that it was a self-defense. I do know for a fact they had heat. I do know for a fact that Brody, quote unquote, punked him out several times. So it was deemed a crime of passion. You know what I mean? And it just got to the point where it worked on Jose's psyche. And when I tell people that story that I was there, it just blows people away, because the next day I could remember waking up the next day and it being all over the news, and my family asking me, what did it feel like? And I can't even put it into words, man. It was a somber moment, because the show had to go on.
When did it happen? Was it in the middle of the card, the beginning? When?
Right after the first or second match. It was right in the beginning. The match the show still had to go on. There was thousands of people at the stadium that didn't even know what the situation was. They heard the ambulance, saw this, but the show had to go on. But the next day, man, the next few weeks after that was hell, because the company took a hell of a hit, and then of course, and let me tell you, the company flipped the bill for the whole trial. And then after they acquitted Jose Gonzalez, he actually turned his back on the company and started working for the opposition, But then now, I guess they mended their ways, and now they're back together. But it was just one of those stories, man, that just you had to be there. It was surreal.
Absolutely, yeah. It was. It certainly is one of the darkest times because, as you mentioned, she was in the middle of a show, and the show must go on. And I can't even imagine what it was like for you guys. We've been talking a lot about some of the somber moments. Let's bring it up a little bit. What are some of your greatest accomplishments, achievements that you are proud of? Just proud to say, I've done this.
Man, there's so many of them. Having been able to go to Japan, having been able to, I've been to, with both music and wrestling. I've been to Egypt, I've been to Holland, I've been to France, I've been to Germany, I've been to Guatemala, I've been everywhere. My proudest accomplishment, probably now seeing my nephew Akbar, because no matter how you slice it, he's second generation, even though he's not my son. He's still second generation. And then my son is in the business too. He's referees for, matter of fact, in Puerto Rico. He's in Puerto Rico now. And he's coming back in the next few weeks and wants to get back into it. But everybody in a lot of people don't know that my whole family was involved in wrestling. My dad promoted shows, believe it or not. My mother took tickets. My late sister, who passed away, she actually did 2 matches. My current wife, Randy Lynn, she's worked shows. She's bumped in the ring. She's been a ring announcer. My little brother has been a ring announcer. I have a cousin, BK, who's a manager up north. We come from a big wrestling family.
It's like a dynasty. You've got everyone talks about the Harts and the Von Erichs.
Yeah.
It seems you've got yourself.
The only difference is we didn't go by a certain name, and it's not a dynasty.
Right.
But my mother's cousin was a trainer, Robert Cortez, the guy that trained me, Bobby Bold Eagle. So yeah, pretty much kind of like a wrestling dynasty, sort of. But my accomplishment is that seeing my nephew now get into the business and try to make a name for himself, and the things that we're doing now. Because see, there's many more accomplishments to come. Now we're wrestling the Von Erich boys. We're going back to Japan. There's some big projects that I'm not at liberty to talk about, but it's huge. In the next year, you're going to see a completely different, platform for me and my nephew. So, but having been able to wrestle guys like Andre the Giant, the Great Muta, Ric Flair, and this is the time where I was doing jobs, because back in the days you just did jobs for the guys. But still, I can say I was across the ring from the Nature Boy. I can say that. A lot of these young guys will never be able to say that. You know what I mean?
To lock arms with
legends. To be in the locker room in Madison Square Garden. That's another big deal. That was an accomplishment. That was for a AAA. AAA had a show called When Worlds Collide. That were dabbling into the whole pay-per-view concept, and they were taking it all over the country. They took it to Los Angeles. Well, when they took it to New York, they had Conan. I was on the show with Eddie Guerrero, because Eddie Guerrero and this guy used to work. What was his name? Art Bar. They had Los Gringos Locos. That's what it was. They were on the show. I was on the show. Louis Spicoli, Diamond Dallas Page, Jake the Snake Roberts in Madison Square Garden. AAA and IWA in a combined show. So, like I said, man, if I were to die tomorrow, I'm a happy man. I really am.
It's been a great career. It's been great talking. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go ahead and take our last break, and we'll be right back with our last segment with the Arab Legend. Ladies and gentlemen, we're back once again with the Arab Legend Al Farat. Al, I really want to thank you. It's been great just sitting here. I know I could pick your brain for hours, and I know you've got hours and hours of stories. I just want to ask one last thing. How have you seen the business? Because you say you 25, 26, 27-year career. It's encompassed so much. How have you seen the business evolve and change? Because a big thing that's really happened now is the social media, Facebook, Twitter, all that. How have you seen it change?
You know, it's funny you should say that, because I was going to use the word evolve. A lot of these older guys, like in my generation and older, you know, they sit there and they bitch and complain about how, well, the business is not what it used to be, and blah, 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 you know, it's not like it used to be, I wish kayfabe would come back and all this crap. Look, I sympathize with what they're saying, and I sometimes agree with them, and sometimes I get nostalgic, but the reality is, everything in life evolves. It's evolution. Things change. Do I miss those old times? Yes, I miss it because of the kayfabe aspect. But at the same time, you know, social media wasn't around, so the guys didn't have the exposure that we have now. So the art form itself, I'm not too crazy about how crazy it's gotten, the art form. Now all the wrestlers look cookie cutter. They all kind of look the same. Of course, now Vince is trying to bring back the whole gimmick thing, but the bottom line is, I'm not upset about it because everything evolves. Everything in life evolves. 20 years from now, they may take it may go back to being old school, or it might evolve into something completely different. I like the fact that it's, you know, it's to sum it up, it's the most popular sports spectacle in the world, and the ratings prove it. Yes. You know, if you look at the ratings, I mean, who would have thought that wrestling products would have ever been in Walmart?
Yeah,
who would have ever been? I mean, if you think about the global outreach that professional wrestling has, and that helps indie wrestling to a certain extent. A lot of people,
and we're not just talking about WWE. You know, there's all these local, you know, even TNA, ROH. Their products are everywhere as well.
And everybody likes to pick on Vince, but the bottom line is, you know, if it wasn't Vince, it was going to be somebody, because with the advent of social media, somebody eventually was going to be the big dog. Do I want Vince to be the only one? No, but it's just a matter of the right product doing the right thing to be able to compete with Vince.
I want to say, I really think that the best thing that's come out of the social media for the fans, they really feel a much closer connection to you. I would have loved in the 80s to have been able to pick Ric Flair's brain as I'm picking yours.
Yeah.
I would have loved if Macho Man Randy Savage had a Twitter, just to see what kind of thoughts he would shoot out. You know, YouTube, just watching guys, just to see the man behind the performer and see that, you know, when they're in the ring, they're these larger than life characters.
A top indie star now that would have been a virtual no name back, you know, 20, 30 years ago, that would have had to be part of a clique to be able to get into a particular territory and maybe not be welcomed in another territory. Now, a top indie guy could have exposure in Japan via the internet. So, you know, it's evolved, man.
And it's just another way to tell a story. That's what you guys have done for decades, going on a century pretty much, professional wrestling. You tell stories that the fans can relate to, fans can get behind their heroes or their villains or whoever. And now Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, it's just another way to connect. And I really think that the wrestlers that do embrace those, they really do it for the fans, I think.
Yeah, and I'm even doing a pretty good job with using the social media to my advantage, but I thank you for having me. I appreciate it, man.
The honor is completely all mine.
I hope it's one of many more to come.
Absolutely. I'd love, like I said, to have you back anytime. We'd love to have you back on the Ringside Chronicles. Ladies and gentlemen, the Arab Legend Al Farat. I want to, once again, one more time, thank you very much. Any final thoughts for our viewers?
Fork 'em all!
Thank you all and good night.